the future hidden inside routine decisions. Nothing feels less important than routine. Nothing shapes outcomes more consistently. And nothing hides influence more effectively. This matters now because modern finance is driven less by dramatic choices and more by habits repeated daily, meetings that follow the same agenda, models that use the same assumptions, policies renewed without debate. These decisions feel harmless because they are familiar, yet familiarity is precisely how the future is quietly written. Each routine act is a small vote for continuity. Taken individually, these votes are meaningless. Taken together, across thousands of participants and millions of decisions over years, they constitute something very close to a collective determination about what kind of future will be built, without any single person ever consciously choosing it. To understand how routine decisions shape tomorrow, we need to look at repetition. When a choice is made once, it feels intentional. When it is made repeatedly, it becomes automatic. And when it becomes automatic, it stops being questioned. Over time, what began as judgment hardens into process. The process then begins making decisions that judgment used to make, but it makes them without the contextual awareness, without the ability to recognize when conditions have changed, and without any mechanism for noticing that the world it was designed for no longer quite exists. London understands this mechanism deeply. The city operates on routine more than revelation. Contracts are standardized. Timelines are normalized. Risk is evaluated through established frameworks. Each decision seems small. Each step appears procedural. But together, they create direction. And direction sustained over years becomes destiny. The texture of daily routine in a financial center is not separate from its strategic outcomes. It is one of the primary mechanisms through which those outcomes are produced. At first, routine feels efficient. Fewer surprises, faster execution, predictable outcomes. But efficiency has memory. Every routine teaches the system what matters and what does not, what gets reviewed and what gets ignored, what deserves attention and what can be deferred. These lessons accumulate silently, shaping behavior long before anyone notices a shift. The system is not simply doing the same things repeatedly. It is continuously reinforcing a set of priorities, a hierarchy of attention, and a set of assumptions about which signals deserve response. This is a first reveal. The future is rarely decided in moments of urgency. It is decided in moments of repetition. And the choices that feel too small to matter today often become the rules that govern tomorrow. Routine decisions gain power because they escape attention. When a process works once, it earns trust. When it works repeatedly, it earns silence. Review fades. Curiosity diminishes. What was once examined becomes assumed. The system stops asking why a decision exists and starts asking only whether it was followed. London understands how deeply this silence matters. In stable environments, routine becomes a primary decision maker. Risk thresholds roll forward unchanged. Policies renew automatically. Incentives persist because nothing has challenged them. Each cycle reinforces the last, not through intention, but through familiarity. This is how routines solidify. Choices narrow without anyone noticing. Alternatives fade without debate. Adjustment becomes unnecessary until it isn't. The system begins operating on memory rather than evaluation. Decisions are justified because they were made before. Success is credited to consistency rather than suitability. Over time, routines stop reflecting the present and start preserving the past. They become a kind of institutional time capsule, a set of responses developed for conditions that may have changed, operating as though those conditions are permanent. This reshapes behavior. Participants optimize around procedure. Innovation adapts to fit templates. Judgment defers to precedent. London has seen entire financial structures guided this way, not by bold strategy, but by default continuation. The system becomes reliable, but less responsive. Efficient, but increasingly rigid. Routine, once a tool for stability, becomes a filter. It decides what is possible without ever asking whether it should. And the longer routines operate without challenge, the more quietly they shape a future no one consciously chose. The conflict emerges when routine begins overriding judgment. As conditions change, the system continues behaving as if they have not. Signals appear that no longer fit established processes. Opportunities arise that require flexibility. Yet routine persists, treating deviation as error rather than adaptation. London recognizes this moment immediately. It is when people follow procedure, even when procedure no longer serves purpose. Decisions feel safe because they are familiar. Responsibility diffuses because no one is choosing. They are complying. The system protects itself from uncertainty by clinging to repetition. This creates quiet tension. Warning signs are processed late. New ideas struggle to pass old filters. Urgency is softened by habit. Routine begins resisting reality. Participants sense that something is off, but struggle to articulate it. Everything is being done correctly, and yet outcomes feel increasingly misaligned. The system responds slower than the world around it. Adaptation lags behind necessity. This is where routine becomes dangerous, not because it fails outright, but because it delays recognition. London understands that this phase is deceptive. There is no crisis forcing change, no visible breakdown. The system can continue functioning, just progressively worse. And because routine hides decision-making, accountability becomes difficult to assign. The future keeps moving. The system stays in place. And the gap between them widens quietly, day by day, until routine is no longer harmless. It is the reason change arrives too late. The climax arrives when routine finally meets its limit. A moment comes when repetition can no longer compensate for change. Procedures still run. Meetings still happen. Decisions are still made, yet outcomes drift further from intent. The system realizes that consistency has replaced understanding. London understands this reckoning well. Resolution does not come from abandoning routine. It comes from re-examining it. Assumptions are surfaced. Processes are questioned. Judgment is reintroduced where automation took over. The system relearns how to decide, not just how to repeat. This is the resolution of routine shaping the future. Stability is preserved, but rigidity is released. Routines remain where they serve purpose. They are redesigned where they no longer do. Flexibility returns without chaos. Accountability returns without blame. The future reopens not through radical change, but through conscious choice. The lesson is subtle but powerful. Routine is not dangerous by default. Unexamined routine is. The future is built by what we repeat, and by what we choose to revisit before repetition becomes destiny. Systems that question themselves stay alive. Systems that rely on habit alone slowly fall behind. London's enduring strength has always been its ability to pause routine just long enough to ask whether it still serves the world it operates in. Because the most consequential decisions are often the ones we stop realizing we are making. Subscribe to join the journey. What makes this particularly challenging to address is the social dimension of routine within institutions. Routines are not merely individual habits. They are shared agreements. They represent a collective decision, made implicitly and sustained through mutual reinforcement, about how things are done here. Questioning a routine is not simply a procedural act. It is a social one. It means asking a group of people who have built their expertise, their efficiency, and in some cases their identity around a particular way of operating to consider that what they have mastered may need to change. The resistance this generates is not irrational. It is the entirely understandable response of people who have been rewarded for operating within a system and are now being asked to question the system itself. This is why the healthiest organizations develop explicit mechanisms for examining their own routines. Not as a crisis response, but as a regular practice. Not because something has gone wrong, but because routines that are never examined tend to outlast their usefulness and, in doing so, quietly constrain the very performance they were originally designed to support. The review of a routine needs to happen from the outside of that routine, from a position that can ask whether the purpose it serves still matters, whether the conditions assumed still hold, and whether the outcomes it produces still align with what the organization actually needs. London has built much of its financial durability not through the adoption of better routines per se, but through the cultivation of a culture that periodically surfaces and interrogates its own. This is uncomfortable work. It generates friction at precisely the moments when everything appears to be functioning well, which is when friction feels most unwelcome. But it is the kind of friction that prevents the deeper, costlier friction of discovering much later that a system shaped by unexamined routine can no longer respond to a world that has moved on without it.